Okay. Good evening, everybody. Just want to make sure, as always, that everybody can hear me properly. Yes. Hello, everyone. I gave everybody the mic, so feel free to use it if you want. You also have chat privileges now. You can chat to each other, and you can chat, you know, as long as you're on the topic of the course. Please don't chat something else. But if you feel free to ask any questions during the session, please. Okay, so welcome to semantics. As you know, we'll be meeting at 6 o'clock every day, 6 o'clock 3 times a week, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. I just gave you a little bit time and also myself time because I needed to pray first, and then I came into the session. The book that we are dealing with is called Semantics, a course book. Now, what I did is I uploaded the content. So the book is called Semantics, or sorry, Introducing English Semantics. It's by Charles Kreidler. Now you can find these in the you can find the book in store books in Saudi Arabia. You can also find an online copy. So those of you who don't find it in the stores, if you just Google, go to your browser, your Google browser, and just write Introducing English Semantics Kreidler, you will find an online copy. Now, what I've done for you is I have uploaded all the chapters. Now, you'll be dealing from chapters 1 through 5, and also chapter 8. So basically, there are 6 chapters that we're dealing with, and from 1 to 5 and 8. Now, you're only responsible for whatever is there on the slide. Okay, so when you want to study, please study from the slide and the textbook at the same time. Okay, so you don't get yourself confused. Anything that is not there in the slide, a section that is not there in the slide, means it will not be included in the final exam. Now, what I have also done is I have added a discussion board, what we call a discussion board, or sometimes called a forum, in your Blackboard. So in your Blackboard, you will find a discussion forum. Now, in this discussion forum, you can talk to each other. It's like a chat, okay? But it's more complex than a chat because you can download files, you can share videos with people, you can, you have many options. You can rate, say that this post is good, this is bad, you can do many things. And this is just to help you discuss issues that you might be having problems with in the course. Now, I'll be also in the discussion, so you're not only talking to me, but also talking to each other. I know many of you have this WhatsApp applications to discuss things, but you can also discuss it online. Now, I have divided the lectures into the 6 chapters that we're looking at. So if you go in your course content, you will find chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and chapter 8 as well. I will also soon, and I sent you a number of messages. This is my way of communicating to you. You always find messages that I will send you, announcements, if there's anything new that I want to discuss with you. Alternatively, you can also go to the board and send me an email if you have a particular question that you need to ask. Now, I will be also offering you what we call a sample quiz sometime soon, maybe next week or the week after. A quiz that will show you the type of format you might be getting in your final exam. Okay, so it's just a quick quiz that will help you. Also, what I wanted to discuss about the sample quiz is that in the final, you will have 1 or 2 questions that are what we call the short essay question. Short essay question. Now, the short essay question is just there for you, sorry, essay with an E. The short essay is just like, you know, a quarter of a page, very short, maybe like 6 lines or something, and I will tell you how many lines. Very quick question, like, for example, distinguish between semantics and pragmatics. You know, 2 things that we will be discussing is semantics and pragmatics. So if you find a question like that, and you find something like distinguish between semantics and pragmatics, all you have to do is just list how they are the same. So 1, how they are the same, and 2, how they are different. That's what it means to distinguish between something. So if you want to distinguish, we're really looking at what is basically different between semantics and pragmatics. Okay, so you're just looking at the differences and how they share or what they share together. Okay, so that's the only thing that I want to tell you about the final quiz, that you will have 1 or 2 questions that are short essay. And in this question, you will have to write. And that is an important issue here, because in all of your linguistic courses, you have to do some kind of writing. So you have to make sure that you understand that you know how to write properly to distinguish major issues. Okay, so before we start now with lecture 1, is there anybody that would like to ask a question before we proceed? Anybody that has anything to say? Problem? Nope. Right? Fine. Okay, let me just upload give me 2 seconds while I go in and upload the content for you. Now the content is there for you in the course content. If you go in anytime in your Blackboard, you will find chapter 1, chapter 2, the slides are already there. Now what I'm doing is reading the slides so that you will know what's happening. So just hold on for a couple of seconds while I look at where the slides are so I can find them for you. So here we are, we're in chapter 1, and it's called the study of meaning. Now some students are having problems when they look at the slide because they can't see all the slides. You know, some students have been saying you can only see 1 slide and not the rest. Now this is basically because of your internet connection. You don't have maybe high-speed internet, so the downloading takes a long time. If this is the case, you need to speed up your internet connection. So what I have done is I have cut down each slideshow for each chapter. So for this, for example, this chapter only has 11 slides. Other chapters might have more than 11 slides, let's say 20 slides, and then you will have problems downloading some of the chapters, but it doesn't matter. You can also you can just see the recordings, and then you can follow the lectures while you're browsing at home from the course content. So let's look first at chapter 1 and what is called the study of meaning. Now we know that semantics is the study of meaning, and in Arabic it's called ilm al-dalala. Obviously, you need to remember that the Arabs, our Arab forefathers, were the ones who first created the science called dalala, or ilm al-ma'ani, because our language is very rich and we are very interested in the meanings of language. So this is a very, very, very near our way of thinking. But what are we doing in this particular course? We're looking at what we call the systematic study. of meaning. It's not just any study of meaning. No, it's a scientific. Systematic means organized and scientific study of meaning. And meaning is a big problem here because nobody really understands what we mean when we say meaning. Yani, it seems so vague. Ilham, you're talking about the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint presentations are already in your course content. يعني لو تروحوا البلاكبورد, you will already have the course, the lectures there. I guess you can download them. I'm not really sure, but it's already there in your course content. You can download them and save them, because if you click on lecture chapter 1, for example, it will be downloaded and then just save it. Okay, so it's already there. So we're looking at the systematic study of meaning. And when we talk about systematic or linguistic semantics, we're really talking about how language organizes and expresses meaning. Yes, Amani, you study from the slides, but as I said at the beginning of the chapter, study also from the textbook. Now, why is that? Because the textbook has many exercises and many other examples that will help you understand. So I am urging you to study from both, because the textbook is very, very organized. You will find that the textbook has always a summary at the beginning, which is very important because it helps you organize yourself. And it also has a conclusion at the end, which is also very important because it concludes, it summarizes for you. Also, an important feature of the textbook is that it has a glossary at the end. The glossary gives you the main word and the definition of the word. Now, the definitions are very important because these are all new technical terms, mustalahat, in semantics that you will be introduced with for the first time, and you have to know the definition. Now, in the exam, I won't tell you, give me the definition of, but I will give you the definition and you'll have to know which term it defines. Also, we just said that there will be essay questions, and the essay questions are based on definition. If I say distinguish between semantics and pragmatics, you will have to know some kind of the definition of both. Now, I don't expect you to memorize exactly the definition, but at least you have to know what it is. So that's why the book is important. Because the book has a glossary at the end, and it will be easy for you to check up on it, right? So please go ahead and read from both. In any case, in semantics, we are dealing with how language, not just English, but how languages, any languages of the world, organize meaning and how people express meaning in that language. Now, there are 3 disciplines, and what we mean by disciplines means sciences, علوم, that are concerned with the study of meaning. Now, for a long time, semantics was not part of the formal study of linguistics, according to Chomsky. Chomsky, the important linguist here. He did not include semantics within his description of the grammar. He looked at syntax, morphology, but not semantics. And for a long time, semantics was not thought about linguistics as a linguistic branch until recently, when people describe semantics in a more grammatical and a more scientific way. And that's why we're saying it is the systematic study of meaning, to tell you that it's now a proper part of linguistics itself. Now, there are 3 disciplines, 3 sciences that are concerned with meaning in general. The science of psychology, it deals with meaning because you want to go inside the human mind to understand how people learn, how children learn a language, for example, how adults solve problems, how they classify the world, how they classify things and sort them. So all of this is part of the discipline of psychology. Also, another discipline is philosophy, because philosophy deals with facts, and also what we call logic. So a lot of this will be dealing with the idea of logic, or what we call in English mantiq. We know that mantiq, for example, what we call logic, is an important part of the study of any science. For example, in any university that you might enter with in America or in England or whatever, everybody has to take Logic 101. It's like when you take Wasail Ittisal or computer and English as a basic. Logic is always a basic in any university that you enter. And logic is very much like semantics, because semantics is very much related to the idea of mantiq and logic. Now, not only is mantiq an important part of university study, but all over the world, even in the Arabic world, in Syria, in Iraq, in Egypt, in Lebanon, all over the Arabic world, people take logic or al-mantiq as a main subject in their secondary schools. So the ثانوية أولى وثانية وثالث ثانوي, they have to take mantiq as an important course in their curriculum. Now, obviously, this doesn't happen in Saudi Arabia, only in Saudi Arabia, because for a long time people were scared of mantiq. And they believed that mantiq was, a kind of like Sufiya or fiha ilhad or something like that. But obviously this is not true, because we are not dealing with any kind of religion here. We're just dealing with language. And also keep in mind that our language our religion is a religion of thoughts, of thinking. Ulil albab are important people in the Quran. Tadabbur al-Quran, you have to think and understand. And so mantiq is an important part of our religion. Only through mantiq can we understand the world. And the world tells us that God exists, and we believe in God because we have logic and mantiq. So I don't want you, when you're reading words that are logical, to be scared and say, well, this is not part of our religion. It is. And the third discipline that discusses, obviously, meaning is linguistics itself. Now, in linguistics, we look at speakers of a language and what makes them able to communicate with each other using that language. Now, and the first thing that the book wants to do is to tell you the difference between human communication and the communication between animals. And over here, they tell you that human communication and animal communication is different in two major aspects. First of all, human language is stimulus-free, and second of all, human language is created. Now, what does that mean, that human language is stimulus-free? It really means that when human beings communicate, they don't need to have a stimulus. A stimulus is what we call in Arabic hafiz or muhafiz, an external something. So, for example, when two ants or two birds or two cats meet or two mice meet each other, they don't communicate about the weather and say, hello, how are you, how's everything? No, they have to have muhafiz in front of them, a stimulus, an external stimulus. So two ants will be saying, there is food, in the corner. Or there is danger up ahead. It's just like in the Quran, for example, when Sayyidina Sulaiman heard two ants speaking, they were speaking about an external stimulus, the danger of the army of Sulaiman's army. And so therefore, all animals, when they communicate, they need a stimulus. Except human beings. When they communicate, they don't need to have a stimulus. You don't have to have an apple in front of you to discuss an apple. You can discuss things that happened thousands of years ago. You can say, for example, Napoleon was the emperor of France in 1700. Now, obviously, there's no stimulus there, but you could discuss it. So the first thing is that human language is stimulus-free. And the second thing is that human language is what we call creative. Now, we know that all animals don't have a large collection of words and sentences or whatever. They don't. For example, birds sing, but they only have, for example, like 30 songs, and that's all they do. They just sing these 30 songs because it's a fixed number of messages. But for us, for human language, it's not fixed. We have many ways, millions of ways of saying things. We can communicate by adding and mixing messages. We can make messages longer. We can make messages shorter. We can create sentences that nobody has written before. For example, poets can come in and write something that nobody else has written. Why? Because they can create, because language is creative. It has the ability of allowing human beings to make ever new sentences. Now, this is what we call freedom from context. And when we talk about context, we talk about the time and place. Context is really the time and the place when people are speaking. So the context now, our context today is semantics at 6:30 on Saturday, the 20th of October, for example. So every time we speak, there must be a time and a place. But for language, it doesn't have a time and place. I can talk anytime, I can say anything, because I'm free from the immediate surroundings. I'm free to do whatever I want in communicating. And so language has a feature of what we call arbitrariness. And you might have heard this word before because it's very common in all branches of linguistics. Arbitrariness means that there's no connection, no relationship between a word and what it points to in the outside language. So, for example, if we have the word goat over here, it's made up of 4 letters, G-O-A-T. But there's nothing in the word itself that will allow me to identify or to point out what goat means. You don't know. You just have to memorize the word. You have to know English to know what goat is. There's nothing in the letters themselves that will tell you what a goat is. Okay, so this is what we mean by arbitrariness. For example, if you have this picture in front of you, let's say, and no, let's forget about this picture. Let's make another picture. If you have this picture over here, okay, you will immediately know that this is what? Yes, شروق عشوائية وخالية من الحواس. How did you know that it's an apple? Because it's arbitrary. It's non-arbitrary, sorry. Because there's a direct link between the drawing and the actual apple in the outside world, right? You can draw it and it's there, you can see it. Now, when we say the word goat, there's nothing in the word goat that will tell me, that this is the goat that I want. Or ghanam, or ma'az, or any other word in Arabic also. Nothing in the word itself will give me this. And so therefore, in language has the feature of arbitrariness. There is no connection whatsoever between the word and what it refers to in the outside world. Now, we did say that language is creative, right? These are the 2 features that human language is different from other animals speaking. That it is creative and that it's stimulus-free. But here we have to make an important condition. Although it is creative, language does have rules and constraints. Constraints means prohibitions, means limitations. It does have rules. It doesn't have an infinite number of words. Infinite means endless, forever and ever. No, it might have 1 million, 2 million, 3 million words, but it doesn't go on forever and ever and ever. Only God has an infinite number of words, right? We know in the Quran. God's words, kalimat Allah, are infinite. They go on forever and ever. But our language is not infinite. It's limited. We only have a limited number of words. And a limited number of ways of combining them. Yes, we can combine it this way and that way, in syntax. Syntax tells you that you can combine this way and this way, for example, جملة اسمية ولا جملة فعلية, etc., but it's limited. It's not endless. And because we acquire our language, our native language, the language you are born with, we acquire it, we learn it very early. For example, babies of 1 year have words. They learn words. By 2 years, for example, children must have at least 100 to 200 words and sentences. So we learn it at a very early age, and that's why it is what we call implicit. It's hidden. Implicit means hidden. It's inside. It's internal. We don't know how we learned it. We did learn it, but we don't know how we did it. We didn't take a pencil and paper and learned grammar. We just did it. And so we do have knowledge, but this knowledge is implicit and we don't know how we did it. And so the linguist's task becomes to explicate, to describe this implicit knowledge that speakers have about their language. And this is what the book is trying to do. To look at the knowledge that we have about our language, the semantic knowledge, and then to describe it, to explicate it. And so when a linguist does that, he writes what is called a grammar. So what people do, or linguists do, is to write a grammar of the language. And according to Chomsky, grammar really means two things. Not only the implicit knowledge of the native speaker, because as native speakers we have implicit knowledge. And when you're writing a grammar, you're using two things. You're using your implicit knowledge that you have as a native speaker, but you also have an explicit. Notice that explicit is the opposite of implicit. Explicit means outside, external, an external description and explanation by the linguist. It's not the native speaker who can describe the language. It's the linguist who describes the language. Let's say me and you are both native speakers of Arabic, but we don't know how to describe it because we're not linguists. So in order to write a grammar, you must have both the implicit knowledge of a native speaker and at the same time the explicit knowledge or the explicit description by the linguist himself. And when we do this grammar, we have to have 3 parts. So every grammar has to have 3 parts. The first part is the semantic part, what we're doing right now. To write a grammar of the language, you need to know the meaningful units of words or sentences, for example. How you combine words to form sentences. You need also a phonology, because you need to know the speech sounds. That Arabic, for example, has an abjadiyya. That the kha is there in Arabic, it's not in English, for example. So you need to know the speech sounds and how they are organized in that language. You need to also have a syntax, how do people know what we call the classes of words? And classes of words, for example, like asma' wa af'al wa ahruf. Are these classes? So you need to have knowledge of these classes of the words and how the members of these classes go together to form sentences. How do you put the nouns and the verbs together to form a sentence? In Arabic, for example, we start with the verb first and the noun second. In English, it's the opposite. So you need to deal with the classes of words and how they are combined to form sentences. And so syntax deals with that, and it also deals with tenses, al-af'al, mudari', madi, hadir. All of these are tenses and how you convey time in the language. It also has a morphology section, which is the knowledge of how to form words, and you know that already from your morphology class. So all of these items, or 3 parts, must be contained in any description of grammar. Now, we just said before that native speakers have knowledge of their language. They're not linguists, but they already know. How do they know? Because they're native speakers. They acquired their language at a very early age. By 2 years old, all of us could speak Arabic. How did we do that? We don't know, because we are born God created us with the ability to learn language. Just as God, for example, created birds with the ability to build nests, right? All birds know how to build nests. Who taught them? Well, they're just born with the ability to do so. Nobody taught them. They did an experiment where they took birds who had never seen anybody building a nest before, newborn birds. Their mother didn't teach them anything. And they put them in a cage by themselves, and then they introduced items like leaves and grass and things like that, and the birds immediately went and built nests. So therefore we know that animals have this innate ability, they're born with the faculty to build nests. And we say the same thing about human beings. That's what Chomsky said, that human beings are born with this ability to learn language and to express themselves using words and sentences. So what is it? What exactly is the implicit knowledge that native speakers have? Now we'll be looking at items here from 1 to 10. And in these items are all the implicit language that every one of us as native speakers of Arabic know, even though we're not linguists, but we know it. So what are those aspects? Let's look at the first one. And we know, for example, that speakers, native speakers, know when something is meaningful in their language or not. So if you give them a sentence like the picture laughed, a native speaker of the language immediately know that there's something not very meaningful about this sentence, right? It doesn't make sense. And basically, it doesn't make sense because very quickly you start to process what's happening in your mind. And that's why we say that psychology is also a part of meaning. Because psychologically, what you do is you look at the word laugh and you realize that to laugh, you need someone, a noun, that is human to do the laughing. And when you look at this noun over here, you know that it's not human. It's a solid or jamad, right? And so you immediately realize that this sentence does not make sense and it's not meaningful. And the same thing with picture A, Henry drew. Now immediately, as a native speaker, you know that you cannot start a verb draw or drew and make the picture draw, because pictures don't draw. You need Henry to draw, and Henry in English has to come first, and the picture has to come last. How did you know this? You knew it because you are a native speaker of the language, and you know exactly how words should be formed. Now, the technical term for this meaningless words or sentences are anomaly or anomalous. So in linguistics or in semantics, when something is an anomaly, it means that it's not meaningful. And usually what we do is, next to the sentence, we put an asterisk, a star, the asterisk star. And the asterisk tells us that this sentence is an anomaly. It's not meaningful. Speakers also know when two sentences have the same meaning. So if you give them a sentence like Rebecca got home before Robert, and change the position of Rebecca and Robert and say Robert got home before Rebecca, you know that these two sentences are not the same. They don't mean the same thing. But if you give them Robert arrived at home after Rebecca, they will tell you that this sentence and this sentence means the same thing. Why? Because you changed Rebecca and Robert, but instead of before, you used after. And you know that before and after are opposite, so therefore these two sentences mean the same thing. So you see how complex a knowledge you have of your language. you have a huge semantic knowledge of your language, and because it enables you to understand when two sentences have the same meaning. The technical term for this is what we call a paraphrase. So paraphrases is when two sentences have the same meaning. Now, when two speakers agree that two words have the same meaning, not two sentences, but two words. For example, purchase is very much like buy. Do native speakers know that? Yes, they know that because they know the meaning of purchase and they know the meaning of buy, and this is what we call as a synonym. Speakers also know when two sentences contradict each other. If you say Edgar is married, you cannot say he's a bachelor because Edgar, married and bachelor are opposite sentences. And when you have two sentences that are opposite each other, we call them contradictory. Speakers also agree when two words, not sentences, have opposite meaning. So the opposite of thick would be thin. And again, this demonstrates the semantic knowledge you have about your language. And these two are called antonyms as a technical term. But we're also saying that synonyms and antonyms have to have what we call as a common element of meaning. To say whether two words are the same or different or opposite, we have to know their common element of meaning. Now, what is this? Look at the set: street, lane, road, path, house, and avenue. Now, all of these words, or this set, have one element in common, but one word is really does not have this element. So, what is that one word that doesn't fit the rest of the words, or the rest of the group? So, exactly, Ilham, the house. And you see how fast you found out? Because you know immediately that street and lane and road and path and avenue are all things that you walk on, right? Horizontal things, أرضية بالأرض, that you walk on in order to move from one place to another. They're all the same. They have the same common elements. They're different. The street is different from a lane and different from a road, but they all have the same common elements. Only the house is different because the house is not a horizontal thing that you walk from one place to another. It's just it's an enclosure. It's a place that you go in where you can sleep and eat and so on. So therefore, all words have a common element of meaning that they share or that are opposites. And this is what we call a semantic feature. So what is a semantic feature? It's a common meaning that is shared by words or not shared by words. Now, we also know as native speakers that some sentences have double meanings. So if you say the word Marjorie doesn't care for her parakeet, you know that care for has two meanings. Care for means she doesn't like it, and care for means she doesn't take care of it. She doesn't feed it or wash it or give it food, etc. So take care of has double meanings in the language, and all native speakers know that. And so this sentence is immediately ambiguous. It has double meaning because the words themselves have a double meaning. And this is called ambiguous or ambiguity. Now, speakers also know when language is used when people interact. They know how to communicate in a conversation. We know, for example, that if one person asks you a question, you have to provide him with an answer. You're not going to let the person ask the question and you don't answer him. So you know that questions also entail answers. If it's a greeting like hello or good morning, you know that you have to answer hello or good morning back. So you know that conversation comes in pairs, and there are various possible answers. So when you hear a question like, when did you last see my brother? You hear the word when, and you know that there has to be an answer that involves some kind of time. And so 10 minutes ago is okay, last week is okay. But if you say, when did you last see my brother, can you say very nice? Obviously, there is no relationship whatsoever. How do we know that as native speakers? We know. Because when two people talk, they have to have what we call an adjacency pair. When one sentence is related to the second. And conversations come in adjacency pairs, and native speakers know how to find this adjacency. Adjacency means nearness, that two things come together in a group of two. Now, speakers are also aware when two sentences are related in such a way that if one is true, the other must also be true. Now, here it becomes a little bit more difficult, but native speakers know it. Let's take an example. If it was true that there are tulips in the garden, you know, this sentence is true, there are tulips in the garden. Is it also true that there are flowers in the garden? Yes, it's also true. Now, look at how you, as a native speaker, immediately found this out. Because immediately you looked at tulips, and you looked at flower, and you knew immediately that the tulip was part of a flower, right? This is a tulip. This is a type of flower. And so therefore, because of this part-whole relationship, because that tulip is a kind of flower, you immediately knew that if one is true, the other one is true also. Now, these pairs of sentences where if one is true, the other one is true, is called entailment. That's the technical word. And what is an entailment? Entailment means that the truth of A, this one, entails the truth of B. That is, if A is true, B must also be true. Now, these two sentences are called entailments. Now, watch out that if you change it around, if you have the flowers first as A and the tulips as B, there is not going to be any entailment. If you say there are flowers in the garden, this is flowers. If it's true that there are flowers in the garden, is it also true that there are tulips in the garden? If I tell you that there are flowers in the garden, do you immediately say, yes, there are tulips in the garden? If I tell you, let's get another example. If I tell you there are animals in the room, do you immediately say there are cats in the room? You can't do that because there could be other types of animals, not only cats, right? Because the animal is the bigger part. But if I told you there are cats in the room, does that also entail that there are animals? Yes, that is a dialect entailment. For an entailment to be true or to have an entailment, the smaller part must come first. The tulip must be first and the flower must be the second. And this is again part of logic. We just want to say or to understand when two sentences have the same entailment. If one is true, the other one is also true. Now, the last kind of knowledge that we are looking at, yes, Sharuk, because it's a part. Anytime there's a part of something larger, then the larger part must also be true. The last thing we want to talk about that we have semantic knowledge of is that speakers know that if a message conveyed in one sentence sometimes presupposes other pieces of knowledge. And the word here to look at is to presuppose. And to presuppose means to يستنتج أو يستنبط أو يتطلب. Now, let's look at the example. Here we're saying that if A is true, all the others are true as well. Let's look at this. This is A. Andy Murphy usually drives his Datsun to work. So here's a sentence. Andy Murphy usually drives his Datsun to work. Now this sentence is just one sentence, but it has many presuppositions, means that it includes many other pieces of knowledge as well. What are they? You know immediately there's a person named Andy Murphy. He must be a person. You know, Andy Murphy is not, for example, an elephant or a cow, because he drives, right? And you know he has to be a male, because you look at the word his, and you understand that this must be, and you understand that this must be male. You also know that Andy Murphy works, because you just said he drives his Datsun to work. You also know that there's a Datsun that belongs to Andy Murphy, because you said his. Excuse me. And you also know that Andy Murphy knows how to drive an automobile, because you just said that he drove, right? And you also know that he goes to work, yes, that he works. And therefore he must also be an adult, because if he's not adult, he will not be able to drive and he will not be able to work. Andy Murphy, for example, is not a child. He cannot be a 6-year-old boy, right? Because all of these other pieces of knowledge are presupposed. For this sentence to be true, it includes other pieces of knowledge as well. Now notice that the truth is there. You know, 9 and 10 are very much connected to each other, entailment and presupposition. But the difference is the following. Entailment, you have two sentences, A and B, and you want to know whether they have the same truth relationship or not. But in presupposition, it's just one sentence. And this one sentence presupposes, has lots of other information that it gives you just from that one sentence. So you see the difference between presupposition and entailment. Both of them deal with the truth. But in entailment, there are two sentences, and if one is true, the other one must be true. In presupposition, there's only one sentence, but this sentence gives you many other pieces of information. And with that, we come to the end of this presentation, okay, which is basically chapter 1. Now, what they did is demonstrate the 10 aspects that are important for demonstrating semantic knowledge. Now, we are introduced to 10 different technical terms: antinomy, synonymy, entailment, presupposition, adjacency pair, and all the chapters that you will be getting in the following chapters will have to do with some aspect of this. So all this information here will be re-given to you in other chapters as well. This is just an introduction to what kind of subjects or topics you will be dealing with in later chapters. Now, let me just go and give you topic number 2, chapter number 2, at least do some introduction to it, so that when you read on your own, you will have some basic idea. Just hold on while I download chapter 2. Okay, people, now we finished with chapter 1. We're going over to chapter 2, and remember, all of these are there already in your lectures, in your course content. I've already created that for you. I've also created, as I told you, discussion forums. Anytime you want to discuss something, you can go to the discussion forum and discuss issues with other students or ask me questions in the forum as well. I'll be entering and leaving the Blackboard throughout the week. So if you have any discussion. Now, in chapter 2, what we have is called language and use. And in language and use, you're dealing with another branch of linguistics, really called pragmatics. You might have heard of pragmatics a lot. It's a very well used word in English, but it's also a science. And basically in pragmatics, you're dealing with the knowledge that a speaker must have in order to communicate. Not just knowledge in order to read books or knowledge of language in order to write an essay, for example. But no, you need particular knowledge that will help you communicate with other native speakers. And this knowledge is called pragmatics. So if you want to find out a definition of what pragmatics is, the book tells you that it's another branch of linguistics that is concerned with meaning, and pragmatics and semantics can be viewed as different aspects of the same general study. So if I were in an exam to tell you, distinguish between semantics and pragmatics, the first thing that you're going to say is to say how they are similar, how are they alike, and you will say this exactly here. Pragmatics is another branch of linguistics that also deals with meaning. So you will say that both pragmatics and semantics deal with meaning. They can be viewed as different aspects of the same study. So how are they different if they both deal with meaning and they're both linguistics? What is the basic difference between them? And it will tell you that while semantics is concerned with the speaker's ability to produce meaningful utterances, so this is semantics. A speaker's ability to produce, to create meaning, to produce it, to produce sentences and words. This is what semantics is concerned about. The chief focus of pragmatics is the person's ability to derive meaning from a specific kind of speech situation. What does that mean? A speech situation is an act of conversation. Two people speaking to each other. That's a speech situation. So with pragmatics, you're really trying to understand how people can derive meaning. Derive means istantish or istantage. So how can we derive meaning from people speaking? To recognize what the speaker is referring to. Referring to means pointing to. That's what you're interested in pragmatics. I'm talking and I'll say, please bring me my book from the room. You're pointing to a book and pointing to room, and you're pointing, referring to things. How do I, as a speaker or a hearer, understand what you're pointing to? And how am I able to do what is called a fill-in information that the speaker does not bother to say? Now, is that possible? When we speak, do we leave information that is not there? And pragmatics will tell you, yes, that we speak sometimes in empty gaps. There's a space that is not there. We didn't say it. But you assume that you know what I'm talking about. Now, let's look at how this is. What is the gap that we're trying to fill in? What we mean. Now, first of all, we know that different sentences, different pieces of language, can have different meanings according to what we say is the context. The siyaq. The context is siyaq al-hadith. So, if we change the context, we're going to change the meaning of the sentence. And you're going to have to fill in the meaning. Remember we said in pragmatics, the hearers have to fill in the gaps in meaning. So let's look at the first example. This is a beggar who has not eaten all day, and he says, I'm hungry. So the sentence is, I'm hungry. You're walking down the street, you see a beggar, and obviously he hasn't eaten all day, he looks hungry, and he tells you, I'm hungry. Now, you as a hearer have to fill in the spaces. You have to fill in the gaps and try to understand what the beggar is really saying. Now, what is he saying? Why is he telling you, I'm hungry? What does he want you to do? Exactly. And so, look at what you did on the pragmatics level. You took he didn't tell you, give me money. He didn't tell you, buy me food. He didn't tell you, give me food. He just said, I'm hungry. And you interpreted, you filled in the blanks. And according to the context, because you know that he's a beggar, and you know that beggar is big for food and for money, you immediately said, oh, okay, this beggar wants money so that he can go get food. Now, look at the same sentence, I'm hungry, but this time we're going to change the context. This time it's a child who wants to put off going to bed. Which is a child, a small child, your brother, your sister, he doesn't want to go to bed. And he suddenly says, I'm hungry. He really means what? But do you think he really wants food? Yes, apart from that's an excuse. Are you going to give him money like you did to the beggar? Are you going to give him food? You're not. You're not going to give him money. You're not going to give him food because you know that the same sentence now, I'm hungry, just means I really don't want to go to bed now. Now, this is a young man now, yes, I'm sure, and it happens with my daughter as well. So we're always like that. We understand things by interpreting them, and this is our pragmatic skills, our pragmatic knowledge. Now, what about when a young man who wants to ask his fiancée to have dinner with him, and he says, I'm hungry. It really means what? Well, this is you talking to a friend that you have just seen or you've just met or you just made friends with. When you say, I'm hungry, it means what? Yes. Can we go out and have dinner together? Let's go out and eat something together. Right? How did you understand that? You understood it because you used your pragmatic knowledge. Now, each of the three sentences here, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, is three different speech events. And it has three different utterances. The context of the sentence changes, but it's still three different speech events because it has a time and place. And when it's actually said, I'm hungry, it means it's an utterance. And each utterance contains the same sentence. Why is it the same sentence? Because I'm hungry, I'm hungry, and hungry. So what is an utterance? An utterance is an actual speech event. When you actually say the sentence or a phrase, it becomes an utterance. لفظيا يعني جملة لفظية. But each utterance would have the same sentence because he didn't change the sentence. The sentence is all the same. I'm hungry. And so what is an utterance really in terms of definition? An utterance is an act of speech or writing. You can actually write an utterance also by making sure that it has a specific event at a particular time, in a particular place, and it involves at least one person. So an utterance has to have a time and place and involve at least one person because it's physical. It happens. It's something that is physical. مادية ملموسة. So, on the other hand, the sentence is not an event. ما يحدث. It doesn't happen. It's just a construction of words in a particular sequence which has meaning. But it's not physical. It doesn't have space or time. The same word but different meaning? Yes, exactly. The same words, the same sentences, but they have different interpretations. The meaning is the same, I'm hungry. The sentence is the same, I'm hungry. What changes is the message that the speaker wants to say using the same sentence. The sentence did not change meaning. The sentence is still, I'm hungry. As a sentence, it has the same meaning. But as an utterance, it changes meaning according to the context of who is saying it and at what time. So what we're saying is the following, that the meaning of an utterance is the meaning of the sentence plus what? The meaning of the circumstances itself. The circumstances is the context, the time, the place, the people involved, what we call the physical, social context of an utterance. So that is what the meaning of an utterance is. It's the meaning of the utterance plus the meaning of the sentence plus the meaning of the circumstance. So it has three things. The meaning of utterance equals sentence meaning plus context. Some meanings are communicated to us in language, and some meanings we derive from the context in which language is used. So some meaning you can understand from the context, and some meaning you have to actually tell us in language form. So what does that mean? The best way to understand it is to make two definitions, two technical terms, what we call linguistic meaning and utterance meaning. Now, linguistic meaning is what is communicated by a particular piece of language. I am hungry. That's the linguistic meaning, the sentence meaning. But the utterance meaning is what a certain person meant by saying something at a particular place at a particular time. So I'm hungry as an utterance means give me money if the beggar says it. That's what we call the utterance meaning. Sometimes instead of utterance meaning, we say speaker meaning. And linguistic meaning is really sentence meaning. So an utterance meaning changes according to the time and the place and the context. The linguistic meaning remains the same. as long as the sentence is the same. Yes, المقصود من الجملة, the meaning behind the speaker meaning, but more the sentence meaning, المعنى المقصود من المتحدث. The speaker wants it to have a certain meaning. The beggar wants to say, give me money. The child wants to say, I don't want to go to sleep. Your fiancé wants to say, let's go out for lunch. But they use the same sentence. As long as it's an utterance, it changes meaning. But the sentence meaning remains the same. Now, I'm going to stop over here because I want to help you. I want to make sure that it's being recorded. And it's now 7:20, so we're due for time. Anybody have any questions before we leave? Okay, great. As I told you, the discussion board is there for you, and I will also very soon bring a sample quiz so that you can see the type of format that the final question will be, the final exam will be like. Okay, people, thanks a lot, and I'll see you next Tuesday, inshallah.